Well, I think three different ways VR is important. First of all, in news, again, the New York Times released during the election campaign in America, they put a camera in the middle of, say, Hillary Clinton's speech or Donald Trump's, and you would get the idea of being there. And then right before Christmas, they released the most stunning VR film called The Battle for Fallujah, where you actually are with the American and Iraqi soldiers while they're under fire. And it's 11 minutes long, and the last 2 minutes of that, you're in a refugee camp. And when I saw that, I had no idea of the scope and scale of a refugee camp, and I felt like I was right there. So in terms of news and education, it's really important. There's a guy here in London called Steve Dan, who's a company called Articulate Robot, who did VR open heart surgery, where you as a trainee surgeon can actually manipulate and do a virtual operation. The one area that is still confusing to everyone, myself included, is how do you tell a story? Because I'm looking here, I'm seeing about 85 degrees. I'm 180 degrees supposedly on my field of vision, but I don't really pay attention to what's going out here. So when you're sitting in a cinema watching TV at home on the flat screen, or even on your cell phone, 80, 85 degrees, but if we've got all the way around, how do I tell a story? So Bjork, 2 years ago, put out her video, Stone Milker, in which she simply went 0 to 90, 90 to 180, and so on, 4 different things like that. And we sort of went around and saw the hills and oceans in Iceland. We thought, wow, that's amazing. It seems so primitive now. And storytellers are still grappling with how do you get people, like it's kind of awkward to turn your head, and how do you do that? And so we're using sounds with the omnipresent sound where I can hear you, right? Because you're there, and I could hear someone else come in maybe and turn my head. Yeah. They know how to record that sound, but it's about 5 different post-production processes you need to go to. So if you got your headset on, you actually look at the sound like that. And every week there seems to be a new advance in technology. So from a story point of view, the people I work with, like Dave McKean and Terry Gilliam and people like that, they're looking at immersive theatre in the round. Yes. Which is not new at all. If 2,000 years ago on a Saturday in ancient Rome, if you're going to the Colosseum, you'd be met by the minstrels well before you went into the stadium, or Cirque du Soleil now, if you've seen one of those shows.
So we're almost going back to where we were a couple of thousand years ago.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah. And then how do you play the drama here, and then how do you transition from there to there? How do you direct that? So everyone says it's new, and it is new, the technology is new, but the basic principles of storytelling, to dwell on only the narrative, is as old as the hills. The question is, who's going to figure it out and become to VR storytelling what Lucas and Spielberg were to cinema?
At the moment, not everyone has the goggles and things like that. So for a company or for a university to start implementing virtual reality, maybe that's a long way down the line, do you think?
The technical limitations are sound. The cameras keep evolving, the big expensive cameras. Then you have the big post-production process with all the so-called stitch lines, depending how many cameras you have. And also the fact that wearables are still very low res, as good as they may be. And those advances in the technology of the viewing experience are so rapid, it's impossible to keep up. Oculus and the different big tech companies, Samsung and Nokia, all have story labs trying to figure that out. And they also have teams of technicians trying to make it higher res and so on. And they all hate each other, but they all pretend to like each other, and it's really a wild west. Mm-hmm. But in terms of education, which I think is one of the great advantages of virtual reality, I think it's great because it is possible to live stream and also allow people in the physical classroom and people online to interact with the lecturer. So rather than, to answer your earlier question, rather than having a smaller number of people looking at your lecture, you can actually expand that to literally millions.
I mean, I do believe, especially with distance learning operations, that being able to be in Sri Lanka or somewhere and actually be immersed in a lecture theatre live, through virtual reality, that could be possible. Probably is possible now if people had the infrastructure to actually achieve that. So someone could be doing a lecture at LSE or UCL and you could be in Sri Lanka, put your headset on and actually be there live. That could take distance learning to another level.
In a lecture that I was giving to our postgraduate students, so I had one in Japan, one in Australia, one in Singapore, 3 on the west coast of America and Canada, east coast, and 5 or 6 outside of London, and a dozen people in the actual classroom. And they could all ask questions and so on. And it meant that they didn't need to travel to this horribly expensive city and get expensive donuts and coffee. They could actually sit at home, wherever they were, and have and the online people tell me that the experience is almost identical to actually being in the room. So these are things I think that universities and colleges should explore, because it's a way to expand their student base and also free them from the huge economic challenge of bricks and mortar buildings.